come into Cornwall, if you go and look for it, in Saltash, there's a park, a Millennium Park. And on the handrails all the way around it are little bits and pieces of poetry of mine. These are two things that aren't there. Well, not quite in this form. First of all, the handrails were made of oak, so I thought the poems had to be very short. You had to take in an idea and then look at the view, really. Or something in the mind that dropped into your consciousness like a pebble into a pool, I thought. So I thought that the words could speak from the handrail, and so there was a message: we are carved in oak, we will outlast you. If we are chosen well, we will outlast the oak itself. That's one of the little messages on the handrail. And that I did think that I was going to make a walk, and that there was going to be another poem somewhere else in the shrubbery which said how important oak was. And I wrote that poem, and the letter cutter said, too many words. He said, it's hard to carve oak, and you've got to limit the words. So I wrote another poem which was a list poem. And then it didn't get used, and in the end I ended up with this, which I really like a lot. It's not in the book, but this is it. Oak fattened the boar, oak cured the ham, oak was a shield board for the man, oak smoked the fish, oak tanned the hide, oak sprang the flame that smelted iron, oak started sparks to fire the gun. Oak were the staves that made the kegs, oak were the casks that mellowed wine, oak formed the frame that bore the beam, oak channeled water, turned the wheel, oak sealed the sail and was the boat, oak was the ink that floated words. And if those words are carved in oak, they'll weather every storm at sea. And if those words are chosen well, they will outlast the oak itself. This one is in the book, and again, they said that there were going to be these short handrails beside the river, and they wanted separate poems for them. But my first thought was that it didn't make sense having this little bit of fence and then no fence, and that in the end there would be a fence all the way along. And so I thought I'd write a list poem which was something where you'd walk a few paces and then you'd be looking and you'd read another line. And so it's in a way it's a walking poem. The Tamar is the boundary between Devon and Cornwall. It's a river of trade that used to carry tin and copper down to the sea, and market gardening later as well. It was a place where boats moored up at the time of the Spanish Armada and much later in the Second World War. Saltash was a town where sailors went to find their ladies of the night and also to eat cockles. It was a good place to eat cockles. So this is the poem. It's called How Many. How wide the Tamar, how deep the river, how many young men went to war, how many dancing suns in the mirror, how many ripples reach the shore, how many wind-failed sails on the water, how many traders went before, how much coal and how much timber, how much tin and copper ore, how many cockles to feed the sailors, how many raindrops dimpling skin, how many waves in the wake of pleasure, how many engines chuntering, how many heron wait in the shallows, how many salmon leap upstream, how many boys with bows and arrows, how many widows left to grieve. How wide the Tamar, how deep the river, how many young men went to war, how many dancing suns in the mirror, how many ripples reach the shore. I'm talking about my commissions at the minute. I had another one to write a poem for Bodmin Hospital to go in the foyer. And it was to include in some way or refer to something which would provide names for all the wards. And my first thought was the Cornish language, because the people that resurrected it had good ringing names and there were enough of them to make it work. But they didn't want that. But I'd written it anyhow, and this is it. It's a sonnet because it really was in the Tudor period that Cornish began to be squeezed by the English. They were trying to remove it from the map, but it's back now, and it's getting stronger. And it's good, because languages really need to live. They give people identity. And this is it. Canal bdev2. This was a Lazarus language raised from sleep, discovered in a faded manuscript, recovered from an archive buried deep. With craft and scholarship they salvaged it. Some things were added of necessity. They scoured a landscape for its wealth of names, found words in other texts, searched memory. Their lexicons have grown, now they declaim. Linguists breathe life into this wounded bird. Now it can ride the thermals and be free. They gave it voice, and now that voice is heard. It is a bastion of identity. They took a language which had ceased to speak and nursed it back to health. Canal bdev2. I wish they had used. They wanted something humorous, so I've ended up with words called fettle and
Dinkum.
Dinkum's the one they discussed a lot, but I think